Because there's a different town other than Major Town. Gong. It is Blues Town. It is such a cool town. It found all the little kind of holes or mistakes that Major Town made when they designed their town and took those properties and made them part of their own. Made them distinctive to their street. Major streets have 8 houses all neatly arranged with whole steps and half steps in between. There's only a whole step or a half step in between, all kinds of different combinations of 2 whole steps and then a half step and 3 whole steps and then a half step in a Major Town zoning board meeting of each block. Each block representing 8 houses. Each block, which can go down towards the woods closer and go lower to the left, an octave lower, an octave deeper, but the same letters. Then go 2 octaves or 2 blocks down from the original center where you learned your first way of those addresses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, going from low to high or left to right. All those great things that you were learning in your brain, up and down and whatever, you were learning in letters. You were saying, oh, that is a letter. I love letters. Letters are so cool. I can look at this and I can say, I love letters. A pen and a notebook, I will say letter D. And on top of it, write F sharp. In other words, in height, I'll write on top of it F sharp and D below it. I will write in height. When I write E, I will write G sharp on top of it. I am writing 3s. These things I am writing in letters in a notebook on regular notebook paper you regularly would have if you have a regular notebook just to write letters in. That's the cool thing. In this whole class, or whatever you want to call Studio E, you don't write these. You don't write these. We don't even deal with these. Because there's a theory I have. If you see these dots in front of you, you have to translate them into these letters. If you have to translate them into these letters from these dots, it takes 1 millitrillisecond or whatever to do. Well, that's fine, but that's too long. Because what we have to do is translate these letters to where they are on the keys, quickly, trillisecond-wise. Why do we need to take this time right now and translate these dots? Where is that on a space or a line or a ledger line or wherever that is? No, that's 5 years down the line. These are what we want to know. What do the streets look like? What do the streets look like? What do they look like? And you can learn them first by even playing the whole lot before you even learn the letters of them. Just like walking the streets, like you walked this neighborhood before. I've walked this neighborhood before because it looks the same all the time. Because it's got 1 sharp in the street or it's got 2 sharps in the street. It also tells you great things. Whether you're in a blues street or in a major street. If you're in a major street, you have nice 8 houses. Cling, 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 cling. 1, 2, 3. There's that 3. Look at that G sharp. Told you. It's a testing rule. In between any one of any street and any third house of any street are 3 notes in between. In between any first house of any street and any second house of any street is 1 note in between. But Bluestown came along and said, I see a discrepancy in your counting of in-betweens. The first thing you say is a 2 has 1 note in between. And then you said a 3 has 3 notes in between. Well, look, I have 1 fingers and then I have 3 fingers on my counting little thing. There could be possibly 2 notes in between. You guys haven't claimed that property because you went from 1 to 2. And then you went from 2 to 3. I'm going to invent a note that's in between 3 and 2 because in between 1 and 2 is 1 note in between. In between 2 and 3 is 3 notes in between. What is 2 notes in between? I'm going to squish 3 down and I'm going to make it a whole step and a half step and make it an M3. An M3. Not a 3 written like a 3 in an address. Then G sharp 3 is always the third house on E Street. If I say, hold on. If I say C sharp 3, that's the third house on A Street. If I always say 3, just the number 3, it means 3 notes in between. But if I say the number M, like a little M, 3, it means 2 notes in between, a squished 3. If I see hashtag right here, and M3, I go not a whole step plus a whole step, but I go a whole step and half step. I go 2 notes in between, and I get a C. Look at the difference. Isn't it cool, though? They both start on 1. They both start on 1. They both start on the first interval we ever learned. They both have an 8. The 8th one is the same one, too. Isn't that cool? 1 and 8 are always the same in either a blues town, just to the left here. Wait a minute. This is what I'm thinking about. I have blues on the left, the blues street. And I have major street on the right. I have a blues street town, and I have a major street town. Blues town came along, and they invented some great things. They did not take the standard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Major 7, 8. Why did I go crazy on major 7? Well, there was a little argument right away. On the 7th house of the block, major town wanted it 1/2 step away from the 8th house in measurement. Bluestown noticed because that there was 1 whole step away available, they would call it 7. And they went in the registry down in the Chromatic City, and they got into the Chromatic City's registry, and they said, we register the number 7. And Major Town was climbing really slowly, designating, and they were trying to figure out what they were, because they're on the right, you know, they were taking everything organized, and they were counting everything really carefully, and they didn't quite get to the number 7, yet they claimed some really great numbers like 2 and 6. And then they got to the number 7 and the address of the Postal Service, and they could not use the number 7 because Bluestown had it. So they had to say, I have to designate my 7th house on my block some way, so I'm going to call it Major 7 for Major Town. Because I'm a major member of the Major Town. I'm A Street in Major Town. I'm A Street in Bluestown. I can be a legitimate street in both towns, but have different addresses because I know what town I'm from. One has a half step away from 8 to a major 7, and one has a whole step away. 2 whole steps from, and then we're going to go 2 whole steps, then 1/2 step, then 3 whole steps, and 1/2 step. Say that again? Oh, wait a minute. What? What? Rewind. No, they were going a whole step and a whole step, then a half step. Then from that half step, they went another whole step. Then from that whole step, they went another whole step. Then from that whole step, they went another whole step. That's the distancing between houses. They don't want it to all be like the city where it's all half between houses. They want a little distancing, so they stretched it in Major Town. Could we have a gong mallet, please? Gong mallet. A Major Town. They made Major Town. They made streets with 8 houses on them each, and they were major streets. Here is a major street in Major Town. There's 8 houses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, represented by letters. That's what you need to learn. What are the houses on each street? What are the 8 house addresses of each street? You're like, Jim, that is impossible. How am I ever going to learn 8 houses in 12? There are 12 different streets in a town, a major town. How am I ever going to learn their addresses? And I'm talking about a complete address. Like here I'm in A town. This is G sharp major 7. That's the full address of G sharp streets block major 7 position. or C sharp 3. That is exactly what it is. See, 3 and C sharp, that's exactly where it is. Because in positioning, when you figure and you go whole step, you get to C sharp. You get to the third note of the third house of the block. 1 being the first house of the block, the name of the street, and the first house of the block. The second being the second away, that distance, one whole step away, called a second. We've gone over the obliqueness of the reason that a W also equals a second, but that's your first interval. After 1 being the first interval, the second interval is second. The third interval is 3. That is 2 whole steps, which means from the first to the third house is stretched, and there's half steps in between because we didn't go half because we're not chromatic city. We're now in a whole tone. We're in a major town street where you got a whole and whole step. And they said, we can live some people closer to each other. We want to make a little distance. So once we're in the next one, we'll only go a half step, and that's what this is. It goes from C sharp just right to D. If you call a 4, it's an interval. If you call a 3, it's an interval. If you call a 2, it's an interval. If you call a major 7, it's an interval. If you call a 7, it's an interval. If it's a plus 4, it's an interval. A plus 5, it's an interval. An M3, it's an interval. An 8 is an interval, but it's kind of got a little kind of a lingo called an octave. O-C-T-A-V-E. O-C-T-A-V-E. Octave. Octavio. Octave. O-C-T-A-V-E. Same letter as your first house on the street is your 8th house on the street. No matter whether you're in major town or the second town that we've never heard tonight, but we know it's there, called Blues Town. What is different between the zoning board decisions that they decided to go whole, half, whole, half in major town? What is different in Blues Town? Blues Town has a distance even bigger than a whole step in measurement. They go to the next level. Instead of calling it a 3, they squished the street down and called it a M3 because of the in-between rules of counting 2 notes in between. So 2 notes in between. Over in the other town was called Blues Town. Over in the other town, they both had a 1 as the first name of each street. There were 12 streets in the town. Both now we see both suburbs, Major Town and Blues Town, 2 separate towns, had 12 streets, each representing the 5 sharps and the 7 letters, as a 1. The first house on the street. But then when it got to the second house on the street, Blues Town pulled a surprise and didn't have a second house. Blues Town said, we're going to even stretch these suburbs and make them even a little more rural and space them out even more. And the second house is going to be not a whole step away, but an M3 away, a 2 note in between distance. Quite a cool thing to see, by the way. Can you learn all your M3s? If you can play them as solidly like this, can you rock them by going low, high, low, high, low, high, low, high, low, high, low, high? Can you play your M3s if you're only playing your M3s? That's really cool. Playing the interval to practice the sight of and feel of what it feels like to be an M3 interval locked in between 1 and 3 or 2 and 3 or however you want to finger it, but just look at it as you're playing it and then practice it without even looking at it, which is even more fun to try to do. Anyways, the interval between 1 and M3, such a great interval. We're into like, hey man, in a blues street in Blues Town, there's a minor third between the first and the second house. And then when we look at 2 streets together, the Blues Street and the Major Street, these are 2 towns. They developed a zoning law for each town. Our streets will look like this in Major Town. Blues Town says, fine. Our streets are going to look like this. Both towns said to each other, fine. That'll be great because then we'll know what town we're in. As a piano player, keyboard player, musician or whatever, if you know these letters, guitar player, anything, musician, any violin player, I don't care, whatever, If you know these letters that I'm talking about, and I'm talking about knowing them, where they are on the keyboard and what they look like, and where they represent where they're from, before you even start looking at a dot like this, learning a lot of letters in your brain and also learning how to write them in a notebook as letters, just E or G sharp on top of each other, whatever, or relating them, for example, that I'm in a major street versus a blues street. And isn't it really cool because some of the intervals are the same? Even though I don't have a 2 in Bluestown, and even though I don't have an M3 in Major Town, I do have a 4. Both towns have a 4th house that are the same. So the interval between 1 and 4 in both towns is going to look the same. Repetition. Repeating. Really cool stuff. Look at this. When we go into Bluestown, that's where they add an extra note right here, +4. Talk about that in the interval section just next. But this +4 part here is so cool. You know why? Because this +4 is an actual note that does not exist in there, and it's in between 4 and 5. Just like there was a note in between 3 and 2 called M3. There's a note in between 4 and 5 called +4. It's really 5 notes in between is a +4. It's such a cool interval. +4. It's actually a plus sign and a 4. Not a sharp, not a hashtag sign, but a plus sign. A plus sign and a 4 means you take that 4th note and you go up by a half step. Because you don't want to go to a 5 because that would go to a 5th house on the street on Major Town. And my golly, it's the same. It's a little crooked on this thing because I had to squeeze a +4 in here. It's the same street in Major Town. Repetition again. So my 1st house on the street, my 4th house, and my 5th house is the same. So I have 1, 2, 3 of the same. And I said there's also always a rule that the 8th house on the street has to be the same as the 1st. So you already know the letter. So this distance between 1 and 1 is the same. Between 1 and 4 is the same. Between 1 and 5 is the same. Between 1 and 8 is the same. These are the same distances in Major Town and Bluestown in both towns. If you see that basic sameness, not only have you learned a lot of the same house distances, intervals of the major streets and letters therein and thereof, because if you're an A and you go to the 4th house on the street, it's going to be a D, D4. And if you go to Bluestown, the 4th house on the street is going to be D4. If you go and you're an A now and you're going on A Street and you go on A Street in the A5, it's going to be an E. If you go at A5 in Bluestown, it's going to be an E. It's going to be the same letter in both streets. If you go to 8 of either one, or octave, as we like to say octave instead of 8, but octave or the 8, it's going to be the same letter in both streets. If you're in D, it's going to be a D. If you're on E, it's going to be an E. If down here on 1, it's going to be the same. It's going to be the same letter in both streets. What is so cool about that? Well, I said that in Major Town there were 8 houses. It turns out that in Bluestown they have such distancing going on with their M3s instead of 2s or instead of holes or 2s all the time, that they only ended with 7 houses on their street. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Only 7 houses are in Bluestown Street, while 8 has 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 in a Major Town, 7 in a Bluestown. However, the distance between 1 and 8 is an 1/8. It's the distance of an interval. So it's a little oblique thinking. If you only have 7 houses, but it's the grouping per block. Like I always said, you're in a block. If you have a 1 and you have an 8, that's your block, just like a city block. Then if you octave it down, the whole thing, there's that octave rule, and you take all those notes and you repeat them over and over again, you move down a block, lower a block, down another block, lower a block, or towards the city, higher a block, or higher a block. Anyways, You learn the same notes are over and over and over again, whatever block you're on. You just got to learn the block. And each block will look the same in look. In look, yes, the same. Woo!